The final consideration in this section of our lesson is going to concern the whole concept of BGP peer groups. Peer groups actually allow you to aggregate not addresses, but actually configuration information for a large number of peers. It's a way of being able to shorten configuration sizes and complexity. So we want to understand a little bit of how peer groups operate, what they are, what they do, how to configure them in BGP, and then how to verify successful configuration of peer groups. This is one aspect we will not be configuring in our lab, but I did want to list it as a common way of being able to use configuration commands for BGP. So peer groups allow you to consolidate large-scale configuration requirements. For instance, when we have looked at the AT&T route server, if we do show IP BGP summary or show IP BGP neighbors, there are a large number of neighbors. BGP peer groups can actually help consolidate the requirements for being able to have common configuration elements and fewer configuration commands to make it happen. There's just an example of some things that you can put in a peer group entry. If there's a configuration that has password requirements, the MD5 authentication between neighbors, you can have that there. If you have common community settings, if you want to use, for example, the loopback interface as the update source, you can use that in the peer group configuration. If you have eBGP multi-hop requirements, you can have that in there. Timer specifications. If you have neighbor filtering statements that are common to all the devices. And then finally, soft reset configuration inbound, for example, ways to be able to put that into the configuration command set. Configuring peer groups are actually very simple. You enter BGP configuration mode, for instance, router BGP 65001 if we were using router 1. You create the peer group with the neighbor, the name of the peer group. For instance, if you wanted to call it ebgp-peer-group, that would be the name. Then subsequent commands, you use the peer group name settings command. For instance, we talked about password or update source or multi-hop and so forth. You'd put that under the neighbor peer group name and settings command. And then finally, when all that's done, to be able to apply the peer group to a neighbor or neighbors, then you would use the neighbor peer group, the name command under BGP. And then it would take all the settings configured for that peer group and applying that to that particular router and neighbor relationship. For instance, if you had a specific set of policies you wanted to have for all the eBGP neighbors for a particular router, you could have an eBGP peer group name. And if you wanted a different set of policies for iBGP routers within the autonomous system, you could have another peer group name. This is just a way to be able to configure it. To verify that peer groups are configured and working correctly, you can use the peer group name, show IP BGP peer group name command. And then obviously if you use the show running configuration command, it enables you to view the configured peer group settings on that particular device.